I am Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to Roleplay Chat.
We are two game masters. I almost messed it up.
Yeah, I guess.
We are two game masters who can't stop talking about role-playing games.
And today we talk about puzzles a bit more. So last episode we did a Q&A, kind of free-form talk. Today we are really putting it all together. Mm-hmm. If you're listening on podcast, then we just had the discussion.
We just talked about it. So now we're going to give you 5 problems that puzzles have and solutions to those 5 problems. So stick with us. We're going to get through all 5 of these problems and ways for you to deal with them. And I think we ought to give credit where credit is due. This episode is inspired by a question that was given to us on Twitter by Laughing Vrock.
So we talked a little bit, we touched on little aspects of it, but now we're going really in the deep end. So the first thing I think that can be problematic with puzzle is making sure they feel appropriate to what's going on, not out of place.
Yeah. It's sometimes easy to get inspired by a really cool puzzle and feel the need to just put it somewhere. To be like, you walk up to the bartender and you ask him for your beer and he goes, to get your beer, you must answer my riddle. And it's like, dude, that doesn't feel like it fits there at all.
yeah, even though you have a cool riddle, you want to put in so making sure it has purpose, making sure it feels organic. So by organic, I mean, I usually create my puzzles the other way around. I'm creating something and I'm like, I need a challenge for that part of the quest. A puzzle would make sense. And then I look at riddles or I make up my own. In
real life, when there's a situation that someone will be cryptic about, if you're talking about something that not everybody knows about, or you're part of a secret organization, you're giving information away sparingly. You're using code words. You're using things that are cryptic by nature because you're trying to keep it secret. So whenever there's an environment or a place or information that's intentionally trying to be kept secret, that's when it feels appropriate, because it is. Yeah, so I guess one solution is go backwards, build it backwards.
And maybe also, it's a trick, but it's maybe for your consideration. It's a good opportunity to give lore. So even though it's a puzzle, given like a lot of flavor relating to your world, would make it feel more appropriate. The players will see it as part of the whole tapestry you're trying to make.
So that's the first problem. I hope we helped you solve it. The next problem is puzzles are boring.
Yeah, some players and game masters think puzzles are boring, and it might be true for you. But there's a lot of ways to make it less boring, or I guess very engaging.
Yeah, one of the things that I really like to do to make my puzzles less boring is to pepper them in to other elements of the game. I often make my combats very puzzly. There's different objectives for the players to achieve. Or maybe they're interacting with something that's puzzly, like they're pushing blocks around, or they're navigating some kind of ruins to like twist into a certain sequence. But while they're doing that, there's a fight happening. So that way, the people who want to solve a puzzle can solve a puzzle, and the people who want to just have combat have combat.
And it's very cinematic to have like a front line of people like defending against goblins, and then people are like, we need to get out of here. And the other one's like trying to solve the puzzle to actually escape. And and a lot of time crunches. It's cool. Another, I think, pretty obvious way to maybe deal with that is to use handout. A lot of people use handout. If you have a riddle, just have it written on a piece of paper where they can actually touch it, and you can even texture it or whatever. You can give a block. You can any handout will make the puzzle more engaging.
And just not necessarily just for handouts, but a way to make things more interesting is to make the players think that they discovered it as a puzzle. If you can fabricate this aha moment where the players, let's say they have a map. Chris, you did this really well in one of your games. So you know what? I'm going to let you talk about it because it was your...
No, keep going. You're doing fine.
Okay, fair enough. So we were in a cave, we're walking through this dungeon, and we find a map. And we look at the map, and it correlates perfectly with the dungeon we've seen so far. But then when we get to the point in the dungeon where there's a hole in the ground and we jump down the hole and there's a whole other floor here, we realize this map isn't complete. wow. So that's where we have that aha moment. It's not like a puzzle 100% like by the definition, but it's fabricating this moment where the players have a lack of information, and when we realize that, we feel special. We feel like we figured something out.
It's very important when you're making puzzle that you don't give the player the answer. I know some people say the opposite, but I really think you need to bring the player to the edge of the cliff, but they're the one who's jumping, right? They're the one who needs to do this haha moment. Because if you give that, if you rob the players from the haha moment, you lost. That's kind of the goal of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's only the moment you actually hear the click that you get the satisfaction. Well, a lot of the satisfaction.
So that's part of the ways to remove that boring factor.
The last thing is if it's too easy, it might be boring. I mean, if it's too easy, at least it's going to be short. If it's very difficult and very long, it's going to get boring. If it's very easy, it's going to get boring because it's just like...
It's too easy, but at least you're done with it.
Yeah, at least you're done with it if it's short, right?
And I mean, the opposite end of this is you make it too hard. And that's another problem. So that's our third problem, is the players get stuck because the puzzle is too hard.
And that's very difficult to... I think it's one of the biggest challenges, finding the right balance of challenge between too easy and too hard. I tend to go with easy is better because the worst that can happen is they figure it out quick and they feel smart, maybe smarter than you. What the hell, right? But if it's too hard, then you're stuck, right? So we'll talk about a couple of ways to mitigate this, even though just controlling challenge is a way to do it.
One of the commonly said solutions to this, so you probably already know it, but I'll say it anyways, is that you don't want to make them mandatory. You don't want puzzles to be part of the critical path that the players need to take to get to the end of the dungeon or to make it to the next big plot reveal in your story. Because if that's the case, if they do get stuck, the only way to help them through it is to rob them of their aha moment. So really, what was the point of giving it to them in the first place?
I mean, another way could be to use clues, but it's hard to give a lot of clues and not rob the haha moment, because if you say, but did you notice this and did you notice that? At one point, just like, okay, whatever, man, do the puzzle. Right? I'm not apparently not doing it. So
yeah. And then another solution could be just to be clear. You know, we talk about handouts, we talk about maybe drawing things on a map. If your puzzle is very clear and the players have a point of reference to constantly look back to, that can help them get unstuck, if you want to say.
Yeah, and complete descriptions. If you're doing it more like theater of the mind, it's a bit more tricky, but you need to be very, very clear, and you might have to repeat a lot. That's why the handout is fun, because they can read it all over again. So yeah, being very clear, because a confusing puzzle, it's kind of the worst thing, because you get stuck and it's just you don't have the correct information. And at the end, I would say, let's say you messed up and it's too hard, they're stuck. Please don't blame the players. Please don't be like, well, you didn't do this, you didn't check the room, you didn't scout this. Like, it's not in a position, right? We're working together to have fun. Worst case that happened, you just take the thing back and you're like, you know what, it didn't work the way I wanted it to work. For not having fun, let's just move on. And maybe they don't get the experience point, or they don't get the inspiration, or they don't get whatever, right?
Something too to consider is that to mitigate having having your players get stuck is to not have a set answer to the puzzle in the first place. I know some people, I know actually on YouTube, it's Guy, How to Be a Great GM, says that puzzles need to have one answer. And some people believe that. I'm not one of those people. I think puzzles can have one answer, but in other situations can just be a circumstance that the players need to use their ingenuity to try to get out of, or into, or solve. So in those situations, you might have a way you think they're going to get out of it. But if they have just as clever of a way using a spell or using an item that you forgot they had, and now they've found a way to climb up the cliff that you didn't expect them to find out, give it to them. Let them have it.
Yeah, you get the yay moment anyway. Let's just hope it doesn't break your quest, and maybe you have a little adjusting to do. But let's move on.
But Chris, there was the thing that you really wanted to talk about.
What was it?
This one.
Didn't I talk about this?
I don't think
No,
you talked
okay.
about it.
Sorry. Yeah. So to make sure that the people feel like they're not stuck, is to make sure that they feel like there's a progression. So have different, like the example I did in the previous video was like if there's 4 clicks to solve, that they have 1 clicks, they're moving forward, they're getting from one room to the next. So making sure that they feel that they're progressing through solving the puzzle you're giving them. So that's a good way to keep longer puzzle interesting.
Mm-hmm. And the last problem, is it the last problem? It's the last problem. I said we had 5. Sorry guys, I lied. We only have 4 problems to solve. The 4th problem that we're going to solve is this bleed between the characters and the players. Oftentimes, even when I'm a player or I'm a game master, there are situations where the players completely disassociate themselves from their character to solve a puzzle. And that's okay if that's what they want to do. But if that's not what you want to do, and honestly, I think there's a way to achieve this happy medium that elevates it. Even for the person who thinks they only want to be themselves, there's a way to add this extra flavor through the characters. So Chris, what's the solution to this problem?
My favorite way to solve this problem is to have the clues or the hints that help solving the puzzle being skill checks, or being that the character is feeding information to the player through their skill check. Roll to see what they can figure out, and once you give them 2 or 3 hints as the team make different checks, then the players are ready to solve it. That way the character has input, matters in solving the puzzle, but the player still get the fun and the satisfaction of doing them themselves.
So that was the 4, not 5 problems, and the several solutions that we have to address them. I hope you guys liked this short episode, inspired by our Q&A segment. Like we mentioned in the first half of this podcast, or in the other episode that I will link up.
Oh, that's convoluted.
This convoluted, eh? Whew, I got through it. Please engage with us on Twitter to ask us questions that you might be having in your games. We send out a call out before we film, so keep an eye out for that. Our Twitter handle is @roll_play_chat.
And our email address is contact@roleplaychat@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, guys, and I think that's everything we have to say for puzzles. Right, Chris?
That's all, Matt.
Let's call it a chapter.